Welcome to the year ahead 2022. I'm Geraldine Yap. 2021 has been a monumental year as the fight against COVID-19 continues in Singapore and around the world. The mass rollout of vaccines, experimental treatments, and the ongoing challenges of living in a pandemic. As we enter 2022, we zoom in on how different parts of Singapore are adapting to a virus that's not going away anytime soon. In this opening segment, we take a look at all things COVID-19, its transmission, treatments, and even virus-proofing the places we frequent. First, Melissa Gold tells us what latest research has revealed about the coronavirus's behavior and what it could mean for mask-wearing policies.
This machine is helping researchers understand how simple everyday acts may have driven a pandemic that's killed more than 5 million people globally. It starts out simply enough. A COVID-19 patient first breathes into the cone and then reads a children's book.
I am Sam.
Sam, I am.
Sam, I am.
And finally belts out familiar tunes.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you.
So how it works is the participant's head is contained in this cone, and then breath particles are sucked into the machine by a fan at the back. And then the particles are separated into coarse and fine particles.
Samples are then collected at the machine before they are sent to the NUS Medicine Biosafety Lab. A study on earlier variants found that patients emitted up to 3 times more virus singing and talking compared with breathing. It also found more viral particles in fine aerosols compared with larger ones. The team is now repeating the study for the Delta variant to see why it's so infectious.
It's very important to know where the concentration of virus lies. Is it in the bigger droplet sizes or is it in the smaller droplet sizes? Because this can affect how much it can transmit. Bigger droplets actually fall to the ground faster and so do not have a propensity to spread as far.
Findings could also have implications for how Singapore handles Omicron, which is tipped to be the most transmissible variant yet.
Is there anything that can be done to reduce the concentration in near-field interactions? So that immediately brings up questions like, is masking important? If it is already emitted, then the next question is, what can we do in order to disrupt the transmission of these particles?
However, some questions remain, like why the team only picked up dead viral particles despite participants being in the early stage of their illness.
Perhaps the airborne mode of transmission is not the major mode of transmission, even though it is recognized. And this has a lot of implications for the kind of mask that we wear. For example, if we are concerned about transmission through close contact, then a surgical mask is good enough. But if we're concerned about particles traveling through the air, then you might need to use an N95.
For now, the team is adjusting the way it collects the viral particles to ensure none are accidentally killed during the experiment. And just like the scientific fine-tuning that's needed, Singapore will likely have to continue feeling its way around the evolving coronavirus before both can truly coexist.
What is the best treatment for COVID-19? The answer remains fluid in the face of a constantly evolving threat, with new data on therapies emerging almost every week. In this next story, Sherlyn Seah speaks to doctors to find out how decisions are made. And as it turns out, artificial intelligence could have a say.
After nearly 2 years of trying and testing various treatments, doctors now have a clearer picture of what works and what's involved.
Existing COVID-19 therapies fall into 3 broad categories. First, an antiviral targets the virus itself and prevents it from multiplying. Secondly, monoclonal antibodies that can mimic the immune system to block off the virus. And thirdly, those that treat the body's inflammatory response, and then includes steroid treatments.
Treatment is not a one-size-fits-all. It's up to doctors to come up with a suitable plan. To help with that, the National Centre for Infectious Diseases has developed guidelines.
Treatment protocols generally depend on how severe the infection is. So before anybody has developed any signs of a severe infection, so these are some monoclonal antibody therapies. Once someone develops pneumonia, and certainly if they drop their oxygen levels, then we usually offer remdesivir, which is an antiviral.
It could even be a combination to tackle different effects of the virus.
Everyone comes with their own set of physical issues and how the body interacts with the virus. And those who come ill, invariably there's a little something unique about them. And so we have to be flexible and have some insight into the benefits and risks of these medications.
Some researchers are using artificial intelligence to come up with an ideal formula. Currently, that's a mix of the experimental oral pill molnupiravir and the drug baricitinib, which was originally meant to treat rheumatoid arthritis. The team will assess again by February if it's still the best blend, and then begin testing the drugs on real patients.
We're also looking at a function of the right drugs being put together at the right respective dose. When we think about combination therapy, it may be possible to think about reducing the doses to address resistance, and maybe reducing toxicity as well.
While oral pills could be a game changer for outpatient treatment, the jury is still out on the efficacy, so findings from trials in the coming year are crucial.
No doubt it would be more convenient. Yeah, so the issue is it absorbed? Is it altered by the body in the process of being absorbed that it doesn't do its intended purposes? So those are some of the things to think about.
There's much buzz now about the Omicron variant and how it has over 30 mutations on its spike protein. But doctors tell me that when it comes to treatment, current options would still be effective, except for a small handful of therapies which may need to be revised as they target specifically the spike protein.
It's mainly the antibody therapies, because they're so targeted, that they may be affected. There's no evidence that the antiviral drugs, either remdesivir or the new oral antivirals, will be less effective.
NCID will continue to monitor the variant alongside ongoing research on treatments.
As scientists continue to study how the COVID-19 virus spreads, demand for antivirus buildings is sending some architects back to the drawing board. Natasha Razak finds out more about healthy buildings fit for the new normal.
This building is designed to advance health and well-being in a post-COVID-19 environment.
Wide corridors like this were specially built to maximize ventilation. The building also taps on a hybrid cooling system, which saves energy by up to 60% while improving the health of its students and staff. That's because the air is completely fresh as compared to using a conventional air conditioning system which uses recirculated air. Now this reduces the risk of spreading diseases.
Another feature, movable partitions. They reduce the need for people to open and close doors, so there's less contact with surfaces. There's also room for flexibility.
Don't wait for something to happen and then try to retrofit, because retrofitting will always create problems, not only in terms of cost, but also inconvenience and the time factor, right? The building should be able to provide this variation of controls or zones to accommodate different people for different activities that is most optimal for that particular activity, as opposed to providing a standard solution.
But retrofitting may be the only way for current building owners. That's if they decide to follow guidelines for air conditioning and mechanical ventilation revised in May this year. Doing so may require large-scale modifications or replacements of equipment and systems.
It's very challenging if you want to implement some of these measures for existing buildings, because again, these buildings or these systems may not have been designed for that purpose.
Beyond airflow design, building materials also matter.
Part of the railings here are made of copper, which has antimicrobial properties. Apart from that, building owners should also consider using materials that are easy to clean and furniture designs that don't have any hard-to-reach areas.
While antivirus building designs can cost up to 10% more, they are becoming a selling point amid the pandemic. Almost 700 homes here will come with touchless features like contactless lift call buttons. Apart from the hardware, the project's architect says community has a central role in pandemic proofing.
There's also an aspect of resiliency which is not just about surviving and is about thriving. What that means is the ability to live in spaces that are really focused and centered around community, so that even though you might live apart, you still feel that you're together with something that has a larger sense of purpose than yourself.
He adds that COVID-19 has brought about the opportunity to rethink benchmarks in planning future homes. For example, prioritizing green spaces, which have shown to support people's physical and mental health during this crisis.
COVID-19 has affected all walks of life, for better or for worse. Beyond health outcomes and pandemic preparedness, other sectors are also revamping themselves to stay ahead. And with transformation the name of the game in a pandemic, we'll look at how some companies in Singapore are switching gears to stay relevant. Welcome back to the year ahead 2022. Most of us will be familiar with using delivery platforms as COVID-19 has changed consumption patterns and driven demand for e-commerce and food deliveries. For now, delivery is mostly done manually, but the use of robots could become more common as testing and deployment are ramped up around the island.
Over the year, these robots have been lending a hand to residents in Punggol. They've been delivering groceries from Oasis Terraces Mall to 10 nearby blocks as part of a trial. So far, they've fulfilled over 100 orders, avoiding obstacles along the streets and footpaths of the housing estate on their own.
We've learned a lot about how it navigates through stuff. One of our biggest milestones last year was getting it to go through sharp corners, up ramps and stuff like that. So it has improved a lot.
The company is expanding the trial area to cover another 17 blocks across the canal. It also hopes to trial its last-mile delivery robots in other parts of Singapore to continue improving the technology.
From the point of view of the public as well, they've seen it more and more here. They see it in Oasis Terrace, they see it going over the bridge and stuff. People ask a lot of questions. There's a lot of interest.
At the National University of Singapore, Foodpanda is exploring the use of this robot for deliveries within the campus. It follows another trial that recently wrapped up at the Nanyang Technological University. Delivery riders only need to load the food into the robot at the drop-off point. The robot does the rest, making its way to collection points at 4 hostel blocks.
Now, the storage compartment of this vehicle also comes with a heating and cooling function to ensure that food can be delivered in optimal condition. And the temperature can be set using this panel here. So, for example, if someone orders a cold drink, the temperature can be set at 10 degrees Celsius to keep the drink cool. The maximum temperature of the storage compartment can go up to 70 degrees Celsius.
Foodpanda says delivery times have been cut by half to just 20 minutes now.
We have found that merchants and customers alike were very receptive of the robots. They like the idea of having a robot delivering the food because they don't feel the rush coming from the riders to hand off the food quickly. The process overall of the ordering can be more streamlined, but this will come with time and with more tests.
Food delivery platform Grab is also getting in the game. Its robot at Paya Lebar quarters has reduced delivery time by an average of 10 minutes by consolidating orders from different restaurants before handing them off to delivery riders. The company is now rolling out similar robots at its cloud kitchen in Hillview.
Beyond adopting autonomous technology, COVID-19 has also driven more Singapore companies to revamp themselves. Close to 14,000 enterprises have gotten support in the first half of 2021 to innovate and build new capabilities. Chua Tian Tian takes a look at how two companies are reaping the rewards of change.
Forklifts, trucks and a warehouse. Things you wouldn't expect to see in a travel agency that used to serve inbound tourists from India. But Nam Ho DMC had to do business differently to survive when borders closed last year and annual travel revenue plunged from nearly $30 million to zero. Now it's transporting goods from ports to warehouses.
We have quite a few of our colleagues, while they used to drive, for example, buses for tourists, they can also drive trucks, or they can also drive equipments at the warehouse. They have got the necessary licenses.
The company's also been working doubly hard to gain a foothold in the logistics scene.
There is somebody always there from the morning 8:30 until evening 5:30 at the warehouse. If anybody calls up for a delivery, literally 15 minutes before the warehouse is closing, we'll still accept the order and we will deliver it across.
These efforts have been paying off. Now, this warehouse where I'm at used to just be 10% filled at the start of the year, but this has changed. The 35,000 square feet facility is now running at full capacity, and it holds a variety of items like dried food, electronic goods, and even medical supplies like masks and gloves. Mr. Mahesh says the firm made about a couple $1 million in a year. It's managed to retain all its workers and wants to double its fleet of trucks to take on more port deliveries. This food caterer also saw business vanishing overnight when large gatherings were stopped during COVID-19. To get by, it turned to making ready-to-eat food packages for restaurants and other places like schools that had trouble flying in foreign manpower such as chefs. It gave this manufacturing facility a makeover worth tens of thousands of dollars.
We have invested in 3 equipments, first of which is the vacuum packer, which enables us to pack in large volumes. The second one will be the blast freezer. Food needs to be transformed from an ambient temperature quickly so that it does not degrade in the food quality. The third one will be a professional inker, which inks the date, the manufactured location and the consumption date on the packaging.
Mr. Chan is also moving into the agriculture industry, especially with disruptions to global food supply chains. He's gone into a joint venture with an operator that builds commercial farms. Vegetables grown here are sold to retail customers and restaurants. Now, what you see here is an aquaponics farm where nutrients from fish water will be channeled to these vertical planting tiles for vegetables to grow. Now, this method of farming is said to eliminate the use of artificial fertilizers and reduce the costs of growing vegetables by up to 10 times. Kitchen House expects its transformation efforts to make up 1/5 of its revenue next year. And with change the only constant, it looks like the firm will have greener pastures ahead.
Speaking of change, another shift is happening right here on our dining tables. Singapore is the first and only country in the world to allow cultured meats. We've started with cultivated chicken products, but as Heidi Young finds out, we could soon see more lab-grown foods on our plates.
These chunks of meat will be cooked, plated, and served. But they didn't come from an actual living animal. Instead, a lab grew chicken cell samples into cultured meat in just 14 days by feeding it nutrients in a bioreactor, much faster than the 45 days it takes for a chicken to grow. Good Meat's cultured chicken dishes are only sold at Madam Phan restaurant for now, in fried nugget form. But it's just received approval to sell it in a different version, chicken breast with a more fibrous texture. They can cook this in other ways such as grilling and pan-searing. The company will also be working with hawkers next year.
Here at Lou's Hainanese Curry Rice in Tiong Bahru, a serving of chicken curry costs about $2. But come next February, you could get your hands on some cultured chicken here for a slightly higher price. It's all part of Good Meat's efforts to make its novel foods more accessible.
A part of it is also an education and awareness journey. Hawker culture, right, is steeped in history.
we are also seeing a lot of interest to better understand what is it actually that we are providing to them.
Each Just, which owns the Good Meat brand, didn't reveal the costs of making its lab chicken, but it hopes to bring these down to match that of a typical farmed chicken, or even cheaper in the next decade.
The goal is to move from 1,200 liter vessels to 250,000 liter vessels. It's to get our cell densities up so you can make more in a given space, and also to get the cost of the nutrients down. But far and away, the most important lever is to make more.
It's ramping up production by more than 5 times in the next 2 years, and is also in discussions with regulators in the US and Qatar to sell their cultured meats there. At the same time, SHIOK Meats is working to bring its lab-grown seafood to market. The local firm brought down the cost of cultivating 1 kilogram of minced shrimp from $10,000 to $900 in the past 2 years, and hopes to cut this down further to $50 in the next 6 months by changing the nutrient feed.
We used to use 100% pharmaceutical grade, but right now we have moved into edible food grade, safe for consumption sort of ingredients.
It's aiming to launch by mid-2023 and will soon apply for a license. By then, it wants to double its staff to more than 60.
We encourage novel food companies to engage with SFA early in their R&D process, as this helps them to understand SFA's requirements better. At the same time, SFA will also have an early understanding of what these novel food companies are working on.
Lab-grown meat was approved for sale last year, adding to efforts to reach the country's goal of producing 30% of its food supply by 2030.
Transformation is expected to continue in 2022, but it's not just the businesses that will have to adapt. There is also significant change in the social sector to cope with shifting demographics and other pressures. When we come back, we'll take a look at what's being done to deal with cracks in Singapore's social fabric. Welcome back to the year ahead 2022. Racism, a strained healthcare system, and youth mental health. These were thrown into the spotlight as Singapore battled the pandemic for a second year. In this segment, we preview upcoming changes aimed at easing these pressures. First up, a law that tackles race-related offences. The Maintenance of Racial Harmony Act is currently being drawn up. Leong Jia-Yu speaks to advocacy groups that are looking forward to the softer elements of the bill.
Can you tell who is Eurasian?
This diverse crowd is here to learn more about Eurasian heritage. The tour is organised by Hash Peace, a community group that champions social harmony in Singapore. Apart from such tours that help expose people to different communities, the group conducts dialogues and engages companies and schools.
We believe that the way we move the needle, the way we change the world is through one conversation at a time. We try and reach out to people in a very informal way, understand where they're coming from, have a conversation with them, and try and build a friendship.
The group believes that the softer elements of the new law are important.
To get the people who make such comments, right, to get them educated, to make them be exposed to these communities that they have hurt and learn from their experiences, instead of just like punishing them and sentencing them to jail or whatever.
Another advocacy group, Roses of Peace, organises dialogues and forums to create more opportunities for people to speak about race and religion.
In multiracial Singapore, it is very difficult to not have such perceptions because there is that difference in culture, difference in race. Very easily, people would make generalizations, perhaps. What would be the best way to deal with such issues?
Many Singaporeans whom we have engaged, especially younger generations, they feel that when it comes to race or when it comes to religion, is best left to the authorities and the state. However, when they see some of these racist incidents being reported, people are quick to react, quick to comment, quick to cancel somebody. But at the same time, beyond that, do they actually engage someone, educate them, and increase their understanding and develop an appreciation for the other race? that gap is still existing in Singapore.
I'd like to move on now to the Maintenance of Racial Harmony Act. So I want to get some of your thoughts.
I think it's timely because of the nature of the incidents being reported. But then again, it seeks to fulfill a gap that exists in the legislation when it comes to racial discrimination.
As a preventive measure, I think it is absolutely necessary in the law. But I hope that one day we will never be able to use it, because I hope that through a lot of education, social media outreach, we are able to be more cognizant of such issues, and then we are able to change our mindset from that.
Efforts are underway to ensure that some of the people hit hardest by COVID-19 are better protected. A government-led work group is reviewing the design of nursing homes as the pandemic prompts a rethink of elder care. Neo Rong Wei finds out what changes could entail.
Suspended visits amid spreading infections. Nursing homes have been hit hard by the pandemic over the past 2 years as their vulnerable residents fall prey to the coronavirus.
Authorities are looking at design changes for upcoming nursing homes after such facilities have been grappling with large COVID-19 clusters. Now such recommendations are expected to roll out soon for designers to build pandemic-resilient homes.
Future homes will allow for easier zoning with shared spaces for multiple users. For instance, a plaza can be easily turned into a temporary test center when needed. Residents will also be housed in smaller living clusters with separate communal spaces and toilets.
There's an urgent need to really review the design to see how we can enhance the pandemic resiliency. We'll have different living clusters, but they can still come together on a common area to have some group activities. But during a pandemic, then these areas will be split out, so they'll be in their own cluster. The intent is to minimize any cross contact.
This arrangement not only lowers the risk of cross-infection, it also helps the seniors mingle more within their own cluster.
So what we hope to achieve was also to create an environment that's more home-like, so that they're more familiar. They can assimilate into the nursing home easier, and also to foster social interaction.
To make this a reality, planners will have to start from the drawing board. For one consultant involved in the review, the challenge lies in balancing quality of life and safety.
The main users are actually a very vulnerable group in our society, I mean, they're already facing all these physiological changes, lifestyle changes. And imagine with a pandemic, right? You do not want to further impose, and add more stress to them. So basically, we want to design to make sure things are as normalized as possible.
Beyond changing designs, an expert on aging adds that it's equally important for future homes to be adequately staffed.
I'm hoping that the pandemic has recognized the need for greater expertise, greater trained staff, and therefore, to get people with more expertise, more trained, then you have to pay them more.
There are now about a dozen homes in MOH's pipeline as Singapore prepares to meet the rising care needs of its greying population.
Initiatives to support mental wellness among youth both in and outside of school will continue to be ramped up in the coming year. And for the tech-savvy younger generation, digital resources will play a key role in their mental well-being. Cheryl Gold with more.
A shoulder to cry on, or simply a listening ear. That's what peer support leader Tiam Zhichuan hopes to offer her classmates at Kranji Secondary School. The 15-year-old has been trained to keep an eye out for possible signs of distress among her peers, which can range from sudden personality changes to moody posts on social media.
If we find someone who needs help, we can first calm them down, then hear them out, try and empathize with them and what they're going through, and encourage them to seek help, and lastly, refer them to a trusted adult.
The program is part of the Education Ministry's efforts to have a peer support system in every school. So far, about 40 students have sought help at Kranji Secondary through their teachers or the 2 peer support leaders, or PSLs, per class.
Students spend many hours in school, and friends play a very important role, especially at this age, which is the teenage years. Next year, we are proposing for more PSLs. We will actually allow them to nominate themselves, or teachers and peers can also nominate them.
Certainly, it's something that they feel is important enough that when they talk about what they want to volunteer for, mental health is often at the forefront.
But mental health support for the young goes beyond schools. That's where organizations like Samaritans of Singapore come in. Besides a 24-hour voice call hotline, SOS launched a confidential online chat service, which has seen monthly demand more than double to almost 700 chats in the past year. 4 in 10 users are below the age of 19.
They actually exhibit, like, example, signs of suicide ideation, or even like crisis, or having negative thoughts of self-harming and all. Some of them, they do not seek help from school counselors, or their teachers are not aware, and even their parents are not aware due to different stigma.
The service seeks to help through advice and comfort. It runs for fixed hours, but given the growing demand, SOS is training more volunteers to take the service 24 hours next year. For those who are still unsure, other digital resources like this app, Intellect, are also available.
Now, the app is entirely self-guided, which means it remains a personal experience, and those who aren't ready to don't have to discuss their issues with anyone yet. It's a comfortable and easier first step to take to seek the help they need.
All of our programs are designed to be tackling the emotions and the inherent struggles. We talk about things like, fear, avoidance, nervousness, anxiety, stress. We relate it back to the individual.
At the end of the day, the common message to youth is simple, that it's okay not to be okay. But more importantly, platforms for help are available at every step of the way.
The coronavirus has changed the way we live. It means Singaporeans are continuing to adapt, learn and grow. Coming up after the break, from toddlers to young adults, we find out how the pandemic is affecting their learning and development. Welcome back to the year ahead 2022. From home-based learning to virtual classes, the coronavirus has changed the way students are learning, socializing, and preparing for work. First, we have a look at how different it is for young children growing up in a new normal of COVID-19 restrictions, and if parents should be concerned.
1-year-old Idris Noor is a pandemic baby. He was born amid COVID-19 measures such as mask wearing and safe distancing. Idris also caught the virus, along with his mum, just before his first birthday in October. They have since recovered, but Idris has hardly gone out since, as his mum wants to keep him safe.
I would definitely like him to go out and make friends, or as in have social interaction with children his age, etc. much earlier. He is very, very fascinated with children, or he would just stare at another kid. He would try to call out to them, he's like, who is this other tiny person?
It's a similar situation for 3-year-old Diana Abraham and her parents, who worry about her lack of proper social interaction.
Growing up, she has always been looking at people with masks on, and I think just both of us wondering if that might hinder the way that she speaks to people next time, or understanding facial expression.
Children born during the pandemic started their life in this new COVID-19 normal. And while parents may be concerned that COVID-19 restrictions may negatively impact their child's development, experts we spoke to say there's always two sides to the story.
I believe that most children would still reach their key developmental milestones with all these restrictions in place, and parents do not need to worry too much. I think what COVID-19 has done is that it's made it more difficult for parents to stay on course, to do what they feel or they already know it's good for their young children. Children are very resilient. Things that are learned can be unlearned. Things that are not learned can be taught in the future.
The National University Hospital says it's monitoring the possible effects the pandemic may have on children, such as in speech development. But it's too early to draw any conclusions from the research, which began last year. One issue that has been flagged, though, is screen time. Children are spending more time in front of digital devices as schools rolled out home-based learning and restrictions imposed on group activities.
In terms of behavior-wise, it does affect their attention span, so they have a shorter attention span, and as a result, that actually might actually cause them to have, be a bit more active, like more hyperactive.
KKH recommends 0 screen time for children below the age of 18 months and 1 hour a day for children between 1.5 and 5 years. Co-viewing with parents or caregivers is also encouraged. And amid the pandemic restrictions, which look set to remain for the immediate future, parents we spoke to expressed these simple hopes for their children.
In 2022, I'm really hoping she can have a birthday party where she can invite her cousins, her friends, and they can run around, they can hug, they can take photos.
Definitely want to bring him out more. Definitely to the parks, more to the zoos, to all your normal child things.
With travel restrictions easing, tertiary students are now heading abroad for internship and exchange programs again. But the latest variant Omicron may yet get in the way of their travel plans. Tan Si-Hui finds out how the students and their schools are adjusting.
All packed and ready to go, this Year 3 student from the National University of Singapore is heading to the US for an internship with mobile edtech company Moloko.
I'm really excited to be leaving Singapore for, 7 months, but a little bit skeptical at the same time.
That's especially since he's traveling in a time of COVID. So far, around 55 students have taken to the skies under the NUS Overseas College program after Singapore relaxed border measures. The computing student booked a flight late November and says it was a smooth process upon arrival. He completed entrepreneurship modules with Stanford University and adjusted to his new Californian life. Then, the first Omicron case was detected in the US in early December. We caught up with him 3 weeks after the first interview.
But yeah, nothing negative so far. Everything's been pretty smooth, pretty good. If Omicron does get worse, there's a chance that we might get caught back.
So far, he's not received that call. NUS is monitoring the situation closely and says it prioritizes student safety.
I actually monitor locations daily on changes in infection rates, changes in border policies, changes in hospitalization rates. And we get students to also check in on a weekly basis. If the situation poses a high risk for them, we will not hesitate to actually recall them back to Singapore.
The Singapore Management University is also restarting exchange programs. For one student, the possibility of flying to Beijing next month is still up in the air. With China's already strict border measures, the emergence of Omicron further reduces her chances of going there.
I have peers who, due to uncertainty, they have actually dropped out from the program itself. Yeah, and perhaps due to safety reasons that they are concerned with. Yeah, but for myself, I would say I'm generally very open-minded to all these uncertainties, and yeah, just to be adaptable to whatever that comes my way.
She's currently awaiting more information from Renmin University. SMU is also providing support for students. If they're unable to fly, the school will facilitate the bidding of modules to ensure they don't miss lessons. There's also travel insurance if a trip is cancelled, giving assurance to those still keen to fly.
From building medical robots that perform surgery to piloting drones for a living, the next generation of job hunters will be confronted by a vastly different landscape as the use of AI and 5G networks widens across industries. Nadia Mokhtar finds out what skills are required to take on emerging roles that are tipped to be in demand.
We'll put in the needle and puncture through the skin and make sure the needle is going through all the way to the correct depth.
Instead of wasting precious time doing this manually, this robot makes it easier for surgeons to insert the needle at the right place quickly and accurately. But behind the apparent ease, robotics engineers have put in a lot of work designing it. Finding the right talent to create such machines can be a struggle, especially for startups.
Would you rather join a startup or would you rather join a big corporate which have a very good branding? But the talents and the soft skill that we're actually looking out for is someone who is willing to learn because the market is ever changing and we need the candidates to be able to adapt to a new environment.
Drones have become part and parcel of many industries since being introduced here in Singapore for commercial use, from photography and filmmaking to conducting building facade inspections. That's why drone service operators are looking to hire more drone pilots as they see demand for their services grow. They're even willing to train applicants with no experience flying.
When you're ready to go, what you do is you put your the two sticks down and inward, then you start it up.
My first job as a drone pilot, orbit around a tree and take photos. It's tough work under the hot sun, but drone operators need more than just flying skills.
The fresh graduates are great at executing tasks, but being able to think out of the box and being able to communicate problems, basically have more initiative to go beyond the scope. Being in a startup, it's very transparent. And we want everyone to be able to contribute as much as possible.
Mr. Koo plans to double the number of pilots in his company from 6 to 12 by the end of this year. That's where schools like Nanyang Polytechnic come in. It's trying out new ways of teaching to prepare students for emerging jobs, like its professional competency model, which assesses students through work-specific tasks.
Many of the new emerging skills tend to be digital in nature, like the ability to apply AI solutions, data analytics, and these cut across sectors. On the flip side, because of increasing digitalization, we see that skill sets relating to the human side of things have also become more valued.
That's what a new Skills Future report is also highlighting. It has pinpointed 16 soft skills, including creative thinking, communication, and adaptability, as among those most urgently needed in the future economy.
2 years on, we continue to deal with the effects of COVID-19 in all aspects of our lives. But as we have seen from the stories, Singapore is embracing, adapting, and in some cases thriving in this new COVID-19 normal. I'm Geraldine Yap, and thank you for watching The Year Ahead 2022.